back, everyone. No matter where you are, no matter what time it may be. I hope y'all are doing well out there. Now, let me just say tonight's upload isn't for the curious. It's for the people who already know there's something wrong with the woods. Some of these folks try to laugh it off. Most people run or just stand there frozen, trying to make sense of what they're looking at. Honestly, in most situations like this, that's probably your best option, is to make tracks and leave the area. Probably don't run, though, unless you have to. Anyway, one of these individuals even watched a 7-foot dogman walk off with his lunch. For the ones who have been listening, and you know, we have a returning submitter tonight. You'll hear another amazing story from Hambone himself. Guys, you can rest assured not a single person in tonight's stories walked away unchanged. Of that, you can be certain. Legends, I want to thank you for being here with me tonight and for listening. I also want to remind anyone that's here, if you've had an encounter of your own and would like to speak to me about it, or possibly share it here on the channel, just reach out to me and send me an email. I would love to hear from you. My email address will be linked in the description below the video. All right, y'all, let's lock in. It's time to begin. Everyone grab a drink, lock your doors and windows, hit the lights, and let's get started. After my children were grown, I bought a cabin and moved off to South Cherokee National Forest in 2013 to pursue my love of the outdoors, especially trout fishing. It was 2016. I was fishing the upper Hiawassee River near the North Carolina and Tennessee border, close to an old railroad ghost town named Farner. I had a couple of catfish poles staked out and was using a spin rod with a rooster tail to catch trout. I'd already caught a couple of nice eating-sized flathead catfish and a couple of big rainbows. I had just stopped at the store earlier and bought this expensive deluxe stringer. It was extra heavy-duty stainless steel with all ball-bearing swivels. It made a nice jingling sound like a wind chime when you were carrying it. I could see my poles and stringer from where I was fishing. They were within a few feet of me, just the other side of a downed log. I cast it out again after putting the last trout on the stringer. I'd only reeled in about 2 feet when a big brown trout slammed that rooster tail. My attention was locked in on fighting it. I'd fought the fish for a couple of minutes before I started gaining ground. About the time I got it to the bank, I heard a distinct jingle jingle. I looked back, and there it was, running with my stringer in its hand, right back up the trail. I slung the trout and my spin rod up into the brush and yanked out my pistol. I ran around the tree and looked up the trail. It had already disappeared. I stood and listened. Nothing. It was like it just vanished into thin air. It was black, about 6 feet tall, very humanoid body with a doggish-looking head. Pointy ears, erect, short muzzle. I didn't see its eyes because it was running away from me at an angle and never looked back. It was gone in the blink of an eye, lightning quick. I know most people would have left after something like that, but I'm not most people. I broke out my old stringer and secured the trout I'd just caught. This time, I tied it up closer to where I was standing. I figured, hey, it could have killed me before. I even turned around, and it only stole the fish. I've heard people say ninja quiet before. Yeah, the jingle of that super deluxe ball-bearing stringer was all that gave it away. I only caught one more trout and a catfish before heading out. I made sure I was back at the truck before dark. When I got home and was filleting the fish, my wife asked, "Why didn't you use the new stringer?" I told her what happened. She said it was probably a bear or one of the feral people, that I was probably just mistaken on what I saw. Well, bears don't run on 2 legs, and I don't care how long someone's been living feral in the woods. You don't grow that much hair, pointy ears, and a snout. It was smallish, though, compared to most I've heard about. Either a female or a juvenile, I think. And I'm positive it had been watching me for a while, waiting until I was busy to make its heist. Like it knew I was armed. Hambone. I grew up in the southern coal fields of West Virginia, in a very small town most people have probably never heard of. This happened when I was about 12 years old. Where I grew up, we played outside all the time, sometimes way past dark. But there was one part of the creek we were never allowed to go near alone. I didn't really understand why, but I always followed that rule. Until one day, I didn't. I was riding my bike and stopped near that part of the creek, even though I was by myself. I just sat there, feet in the water, enjoying the quiet. I didn't realize at first how quiet it really was. No birds, no bugs, no dogs barking. It was dead silent. It was starting to get dark. The lightning bugs were coming out, and I was watching them when I started hearing a sound I couldn't explain. I grew up hunting in the mountains. I know the sounds animals make around here, but this wasn't normal. I heard water splashing, loud, like something heavy running straight through the creek. I stood up and looked up the hollow, trying to see where it was coming from. And then I saw it. It looked like a huge dog, but something wasn't right. It was standing on two legs. Its head was enormous, way too big for its body. It was jet black and had glowing reddish yellow eyes. I grabbed my bike and pedaled harder than I ever had in my life. My 12-year-old brain couldn't even register what I'd just seen. I just knew. I thought I was going to die. But when I finally looked back, the thing wasn't chasing me. It had turned and was heading back up the hollow. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen, not right away. But 2 nights later, something else happened. We were all sitting on the front porch when, out of nowhere, every single dog in the neighborhood started going crazy. They were making sounds I'd never heard from them before. My dad stood up and said, "Come on, everybody get in the house." Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I got up to get a drink of water. As I was standing at the sink, the dogs outside started whimpering, not barking anymore, just whining and crying. I looked out the kitchen window, and there it was again, that same thing, walking right down our alley, just a little dirt road behind the house. It was massive, terrifying, but what scared me the most was when it looked right at me. It's like it knew I was watching it, and I didn't even realize it, but I was crying. That's how scared I was. When I turned around, my mom and dad were standing there. I hadn't even heard them come in, and that's when they told me they'd seen it before, when they were kids. They said they hadn't seen it for a long time, not since the night they brought me home from the hospital when I was born. That night, the same thing happened. All the dogs went crazy, and that thing came walking down the alley. I've never told anyone this outside of my family. I don't know what that creature is, I just know what I saw. And I've had night terrors ever since. Doctors gave me medication, but I still wake up screaming sometimes. Anyway, that's my story. You don't have to share it if you don't want to. I just wanted someone to hear it. P.S. I love listening to the stories you share. Thank you for giving people a place to be heard. So many people don't understand or believe, but you do. I'm definitely not what you would call a writer or anything, so I'll just tell it like it happened. This was back in 2019. I was working nights on a small road crew down in DeKalb County, Alabama, just outside Fort Payne. It was one of those patch and fill jobs out on a county road that doesn't see much traffic, especially at night. We were doing cleanup and shoulder work around a blind turn that drops off into some woods. It was just me and one other guy that night. I had the truck parked facing the curve with the light bar running, and I was standing about 15 feet away, shoveling gravel into a soft shoulder spot where rain had washed it out. I kept hearing something behind me in the tree line. like little twigs snapping. I figured it was a deer or maybe a possum nosing around the ditch. No big deal. But then it didn't stop. Every time I shoveled and paused, I'd hear 2 or 3 steps in the leaves, then it would go dead quiet again. That happened maybe 3 or 4 times. I finally turned around with the shovel in my hand and shined my headlamp toward the woods. At first I didn't see anything, but then something moved between 2 trees. It stepped out enough that I could see the silhouette. The outline was tall. It had to be over 6 foot, but it wasn't standing straight. Looked like it was hunched forward a little. It had a big head, not round like a person's, more like a dog's. It was wide in the shoulders with long arms hanging down. Didn't say a word, didn't growl or snarl or anything. It just stood there watching me. I backed up in the direction of the truck, and I guess it saw the light bar or noticed the other guy standing on the other side, because it stepped back into the trees and disappeared. I didn't say anything right away. We finished up what we had to do and got the hell out of there before midnight. I told my coworker the next day. He just kind of stared at me and said, "That's not the first time somebody's seen something around that stretch." Anyway, I'm not trying to convince anyone. I just know what I saw. It wasn't a bear, it wasn't a man, and it sure as hell wasn't scared of me. Lonnie S. I live a couple miles outside of Arkadelphia on a little piece of land I've had since the early 90s. Just trees and a double wide with a shed out back. I've never seen anything weird out here until what happened in May of 2021. We had some storms come through and knock a few limbs down, so I spent most of the afternoon cleaning the yard and throwing brush into the burn pile. I didn't light it yet because the ground was still damp. I planned to burn it the next morning. Around 1 a.m., I woke up because my dog was barking. He's a lab, but he's always been a quiet dog. He never barks at anything. When I looked out the kitchen window, he was out by the shed, hackles up facing the burn pile. I flipped on the porch light and stepped out with a flashlight. That's when I saw something standing by the pile. It was bent over, like squatted down, and it was digging through the branches, not like an animal sniffing, more like it was picking through it, trying to find something. It stood up when the light hit it. It was tall, way taller than me, and I'm 6 foot. Thin but wide through the chest, had long arms, and the hands, if you want to call them that, looked like claws. It was covered in dark fur, but it was mangy looking at the same time, like it definitely had mange or been in a fire. The head looked like a big coyote, except a lot meaner. Narrow face, long nose, and the ears were standing straight up. It stared at me for a second or two, just long enough to make my stomach twist in knots. Then it took off toward the woods behind the shed. This thing moved really fast, but it wasn't running like a person or a dog. It had this weird sideways movement that just did not look normal. I got the dog inside, locked everything up, and sat in the living room with my pistol on my lap until the sun came up. I didn't go back out there until noon. The burn pile was scattered everywhere, not like it had blown over, like someone had pulled it apart by hand. I haven't burned anything out there since that happened. Now I haul all the brush to a landfill. It takes longer, but I don't care. That thing, it was looking for food, I guess. I don't really know. It was looking for something, and I sure as hell didn't want it to find it. Anonymous. This happened in 2020, right before everything got shut down. I live in a rental house outside Plattsmouth, near the edge of a field. It's a quiet area, cornfields, scattered trees, just a few houses down the gravel road. Nothing ever really happens here. Until that night. It was around 2 in the morning and I was up late watching TV. My husband was out of town for work and the kids were staying at their grandma's. I don't normally stay up that late, but it was a Friday and I couldn't sleep. I had the TV turned down pretty low and I started to notice this weird sound over top of it, like a faint huffing or blowing sound. I paused the show and listened. That's when I realized it was coming from the window, the living room window. It sounded like something breathing, fogging up the glass, deep breaths. I didn't move, I just sat there on the couch holding my breath. After a few seconds, I stood up really slowly and peeked around the corner toward the window. There was something standing just on the other side. I couldn't see it clearly at first, but it was tall. It had its face close to the glass, and the porch light was just bright enough to light the side of its head. It did look like a dog, or a wolf, you could say, but it was standing upright. Its shoulders had a hunched angle, arms down at its sides. I could see its chest moving. That was the breathing. It was fogging the glass with each exhale. I backed into the hallway and grabbed my phone. I didn't call 911. I didn't even think to. I just stood there waiting to hear if it was moving. After about 20 seconds, I heard it sniff like a deep, wet sniff right against the glass, and then it just left. I just heard heavy footsteps crunching off into the yard. I waited a full hour before I worked up the nerve to peek outside. There were tracks in the frost, huge ones, spaced out like it was walking on 2 feet. My husband didn't believe me when I told him, said it was a tall guy in a mask playing a prank. But I know it wasn't. That wasn't a man. That thing had a snout, and it was too tall for any person to be looking in through that window. Anonymous. I was out elk hunting in late October of 2017, somewhere north of Red Lodge, close to the Beartooth Range. Not too high up, but enough elevation that the mornings were icy and the air carried sound really well. It was around 7 in the morning. I'd gotten my glassing spot before sunup and had just started to see light hit the treetops across the valley. Everything was quiet. There was no movement yet. I had some coffee, my rifle laid across my knees, and my binoculars out. I scanned across a clearing on the opposite ridge, just casually sweeping. That's when I saw something crouched down on the far side, maybe 250 yards out. At first, I thought for sure it was a bear sitting on its haunches, but it wasn't shaped right. It was a lot leaner, shoulders too square, and its arms were extremely long. It wasn't facing sideways like most animals, it was facing me. It looked like it was crouched with both hands on the ground in front of it, just frozen there, not blinking, not moving, just staring in my direction. I watched it through the glass for at least 30 seconds trying to figure out what I was seeing. The head was shaped like a wolf or a shepherd, but too big for the frame. The ears were sticking straight up. I couldn't make out the eyes, but I knew it was locked onto me. That's when I got the feeling, like I definitely wasn't alone. It never flinched, never sniffed, never twitched its ears or flicked a tail, and yes, it had a tail. It just stayed crouched and stared until I finally lowered the binoculars. When I looked again 5 seconds later, it was gone. I sat there for another hour, but I never saw it move. No sound, no footprints, and I didn't see any elk that morning either. I'd say that thing had every animal from here to Kingdom Come scared off. I know if I was a critter out there, that thing would scare me off. I've been out in that area a few times since. It's still quiet, still pretty, but I don't glass the ridges as long anymore. Because that thing wasn't hiding, it wanted me to see it. And it was waiting to see what I'd do when I did. Anonymous. Before I get completely into this, let me just get this out of the way first. Yes, I screamed. Yes, I dropped my sandwich. No, I do not want to talk about it. Except, I guess I am talking about it since I'm writing this. It was only last summer, in August, in Mississippi. I worked for the county part-time doing road cleanup. trash pickup, illegal dumping reports, that sort of thing. It's pretty boring, but sometimes you find weird stuff like mannequins, old toilets, or dead animals in strange places. We call them redneck mysteries. Anyway, I was out by myself that day, way out on one of the back roads near Mize where folks like to dump stuff behind the old gravel pit. I pulled up around lunchtime, opened the tailgate, sat down with my Mountain Dew and a gas station sandwich, and that's when I smelled it. Like a big wet dog mixed with something sour, but thick, like the smell had weight to it. I stood up thinking maybe something died nearby, took a few steps toward the trees, and there it was. This Dogman thing was standing inside the shade line. It wasn't crouched, it wasn't hiding from me, it was just standing there, like it had been watching me for a long time. Tall, I'd say close to 7 feet, being realistic. Real wide shoulders. It had this coat of gray fur that looked pretty thick, but its chest was patchy like it had been scarred or in a fight, or maybe there was just no hair there to begin with. I don't know. Its arms were too long for my liking, and its legs were bent very odd. And its head. Listen, I've been around dogs all my life. I know what they look like. This wasn't a dog. This was a dog costume filled with nightmares. Big ears, long snout, and it was panting. Its tongue was lolling out, just staring at me with yellow eyes like it was trying to decide if it wanted me or my sandwich. I stopped and froze. My sandwich slipped out of my hands, and yes, I made a noise. I wouldn't call it a scream exactly, but it wasn't a war cry either. Something in between a toddler and a kettle boiling. The thing blinked really slow, and then it stepped out of the trees. It didn't lunge or charge, it was just casual about it. It wasn't in a hurry, that's for sure. It knew I was going to back up, and back up I did. I tripped, rolled across the tailgate, and down off to the side of the truck. Scraped my elbow pretty bad, and somehow managed to crawl backward under the truck like that was going to help me in any way at all. I was in survival mode. Come on. That's when it bent down, picked up my sandwich. It sniffed it, made this weird snorting sound, then turned and walked back into the trees like it was just done with me. It never even looked back. I waited about 20 minutes under that truck shaking before I drove out of there like my seat was on fire. I didn't report it. What was I supposed to say? Hey boss, a 7-foot-tall wolf man stole my BLT and hurt my feelings. Look, I don't know what these things are or what they want or where they come from. I don't want to see it again. And if you're wishing to see one of these things, you're insane. If you find a clawed-up wrapper with a bite taken out of it on County Road 14, you know who to thank. Anonymous. I retired in 2014 and moved out to a little spot in Emery County, Utah. My place sits about 1.5 miles off the main road, tucked into a canyon with a decent view of the cliffs behind it. That's why I picked it. I like to sit out in the evenings with my coffee and just watch the light change on the rocks. This happened in late September of 2014. Still warm during the day, but the evenings were starting to cool down a bit. I was out back in my usual spot, just sitting in a plastic lawn chair when I noticed something moving up on the rocks across the way. It was still pretty light out, but the sun was low enough that I was getting mostly shadow on the side of the canyon. Whatever it was moving low to the ground, real close to the rock, but not slithering. Kind of. It's hard to explain. At first I thought it had to be a cougar. We get those around here sometimes, but the way it moved just did not click with me. It didn't flow like a cat. It didn't stalk or prowl. It crawled, like elbows and knees hugging the surface tight. And this thing was fast. I grabbed a set of binoculars I keep by the door and got a look. It was shaped like a man, a tall one. Its arms were longer than anything I've ever seen, and the head was shaped like a dog or maybe a coyote. It was kind of pinched at the muzzle. Its skin or fur, I guess, looked like dry mud. It looked cracked in places, dusty in others. The worst part was the way it moved. It didn't lift its limbs, it just dragged them forward in these big liquid motions like it didn't have bones. No bouncing, no shifting weight, just this smooth, unnatural flow across the rock face. It stopped about halfway up the ridge, turned its head like it heard something, and then folded backward into the shadow behind a boulder. That's the best way I can describe it. Like it bent itself the wrong way and disappeared. I sat out there looking all over the place for another hour, but I never saw it again. It never came back. I didn't dare tell my kids. I didn't want them to worry and be scared. I didn't call anyone and tell no one about it. I didn't even write it down until now. This is the first time I've spoken out loud. I just know I've lived around animals my whole life, and I've never seen or heard of anything else that could move like that. Not unless it was built for something we're not supposed to see or understand. Dan. Last summer, I took my two sons on a weekend camping trip near the 11-Point River. We were maybe 5 miles off the highway, on land that belongs to a friend of mine. It's a pretty remote area. There's no lights or anything out there, just a little clearing by the creek where you can fish and cook over a fire. I loved it. It was my second night there, and we were sitting around finishing up dinner. My youngest had already crashed in the tent, but my older boy, he's 14, was still up, messing around with the thermal scope we'd brought with us. He's really into that stuff, loves gear. I let him take the scope and scan the tree line while I cleaned up. He stopped mid-sentence and said, "Hey, Dad, there's something big across the creek." I stopped and walked over and looked where he was pointing. Sure enough, there was something standing just inside the tree line, maybe 30 yards across the water. Big. I could see the shape of it from the firelight. Looked like it was standing on two legs, maybe leaning against a tree. He aimed the thermal scope right at it, and nothing showed up. Nothing. It didn't even register as a cold spot, just blank, like it wasn't even there. I looked with my own eyes. It was still there, clear as day. Big head, long arms, dog-like shape, standing perfectly still like it was hunting or maybe watching us. But through the scope, black void, like it was being erased. I took the scope and tried it myself. I scanned the area around it. Raccoons show up fine, tree trunks. Even the heat signature from our fire was reflecting on the rocks, but that thing, nothing. And then it moved. It just silently and slowly disappeared. I don't remember even packing everything up. I just know by the time the sun was up, we were back at the truck and headed for the nearest gas station. I don't like to talk about this in front of the boys. I don't like to scare them, and it definitely does. But my older son knew what he saw, or didn't see, I guess. He just kept saying, "It's like it wasn't part of our world." I haven't been back to that spot since. Not because I'm scared of it attacking. It's the absence that got to me. That blank space where something should have been lighting up the scope. I don't know what kind of creature gives off zero heat, but it was real. It was there, and it was watching us. Anonymous. Hey, Reels. First off, I want to say I love your channel. I don't get to listen as much as I used to, but I still get a little thrill every time I see a new upload pop up. I figured I'd share something with you that happened to me last spring or early summer of 2024. I'm not saying it was Dogman, but I'm not saying it wasn't either. I still don't know what the hell it was. So here's a little background first. I'm a 50-year-old woman and I've lived alone for years. Up until recently, I also worked alone, overnight shifts, way out in the middle of nowhere at an animal sanctuary in northwest Wisconsin. The place takes in dogs and cats from all over. We had over 100 dogs and just as many cats on the property. The point is, I'm used to being out there by myself. Not a lot of things rattle me. I've had to run off coyotes more than once, and I even ran into one of our dog houses when it caught fire and saved the 3 dogs inside. So yeah, not much scares me anymore. But this night, this rattled me, and it rattled the dogs too. It was early morning just after dawn, and I was finishing up my duties before the day shift came in. At that time, the sanctuary had 3 main buildings and a bunch of smaller townhouses. Little heated buildings where a couple dogs would be housed together. Each had a dog run, sometimes even a couch or an old chair inside. The whole property set right off a river bottom, so we were used to hearing coyotes and other wildlife. But this was different. As I came out of one of the buildings, I heard this awful screaming. It honestly sounded like a big dog had gotten a hold of a little dog and was tearing it apart. I was cussing under my breath, thinking, who the hell got out and how? But when I came down the hill toward the noise, something felt wrong. It was like the air had changed. That's the only way I can explain it. The lightning was flashing constantly, not big strikes, just strobing flashes, lighting everything up like a club strobe. No thunder, just a few fat raindrops coming down, and this awful sound still going. I came around the bend, and only 3 dogs were outside. Ned, a wolf dog, who was still in his enclosure, and Tucker and Remy, a husky and a huge Caucasian mastiff who shared one of the townhouses. All 3 were locked in, standing still, just staring at the woods, and they weren't making a sound. That alone freaked me out. Remy, especially, would normally be going nuts, barking, charging, making his presence known. But all 3 dogs were silent, completely frozen, staring toward the trees. I stopped walking and ducked behind some bushes near Tucker and Remy's run. I crouched there and waited with them. The noise kept changing. It wasn't just a scream anymore. The pitch kept rising and falling. Sometimes it sounded like it was coming from the ground, and then the next second it was up in the trees. I don't mean metaphorically either. It literally sounded like something was moving up through the treetops. And that sound went on for a full 5 minutes, non-stop, shifting, creepy, unnatural. I grew up in the country. I know what rabbits sound like when they're being attacked. I know what foxes sound like, coyotes, owls, all of it. This wasn't any of those. And whatever it was, the dogs knew it too. They kept glancing at each other like they were checking in. None of them barked, none growled, just that eerie quiet, except for the screaming from the woods. Eventually the sound faded, just drifted off and stopped like it was never there. I stood up and talked softly to the dogs, and they slowly went back into their houses. They still weren't acting normal. By the time the day shift arrived, the lightning had slowed down a bit, but it was still flashing off and on. I met up with the other worker and we walked down to the wood line together. Just stood there staring at the dark tree line, trying to make sense of it. We didn't see or hear anything else. The thing is, anyone who's worked out there alone has had weird stuff happen to them. Never quite like this, but definitely creepy stuff. So she didn't question what I told her. Now when I talk about it, I call it the Pukwudgie. I know that's supposed to be a Native American creature, kind of like a forest troll. And I'm not saying that's what it was, but the name helps me deal with it. Makes it feel a little less real, if that makes sense. Because when you live and work alone, you can't afford to be scared of every weird thing in the woods. That's about it. Like I said, I don't expect you to read this on your channel, especially since I don't know what it even was. But if you want to, feel free. Just don't use my real name. Take care of yourself out there. Name redacted. friends, legends, family. To the folks who shared these stories, thank you for putting it into words. I know some of you sat on these memories or nightmares for years, unsure if you should say anything at all, but you did. And now you've got a whole community out here listening. And to the rest of y'all tuning in, whether you believe every word or you're still trying to wrap your head around it, that's fine. These stories weren't sent in to convince anyone. They're sent in because sometimes the only thing scarier than seeing it is being the only one who did. A huge thanks and shout out to all of the channel members out there that helped push this thing forward. You guys are true legends around these parts. I can't thank you enough. If you enjoyed tonight's upload, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave a comment. Drop your thoughts, theories, and opinions. Everyone is welcome to speak out openly and honestly, as long as it's not disrespectful to anyone else. Conversations can be had and heard without being nasty to another person, especially someone who's been through something so traumatic. Again, thanks for being here, and I hope y'all are blessed with nothing but the best. Stay alert. Be aware of your surroundings. Keep an open mind. Keep your eyes open. It could save your life one day. And whatever you do, y'all, don't drop your sandwich. Please stay safe out there. It's a dangerous world. I love each and every one of you, and until next time, my friends, watch over your loved ones. Keep your head on a swivel. And as always, good night.